The foundation of the Bell Telephone Company replaced an agreement between Alexander Graham Bell and his backers, the most notable of whom were Gardner Green Hubbard and Thomas Sanders. In March 1879, it was renamed the National Bell Telephone Company, and in March 1880, it was renamed the American Bell Telephone Company. It had purchased a majority position in the Western Electric Company from Western Union by 1881. Only 3 years prior, Western Union had turned down Gardner Hubbard's offer to sell all telephone rights for $100,000, or $2.68 million in 2009 US dollars. If you want to know all about the history of AT&T, how did AT&T get so big, then stay tuned till the end of the video. History. American Bell's management established what would become AT&T Long Lines in 1880. The project was the first of its type in terms of establishing a nationwide long-distance network with a commercially feasible cost structure. On March 3, 1885, this initiative was formally formed as the American Telephone and Telegraph Company. The network began in New York and reached Chicago in 1892. Although Bell's telephone patent expired in 1893, the company's significantly larger customer base made its service far more valuable than alternatives, and significant expansion persisted. The American Telephone and Telegraph Company purchased American Bell's assets on December 30, 1899, because Massachusetts corporate laws were more restrictive than those of New York, where AT&T was headquartered. With this asset transfer, AT&T became the parent company of the Bell system. Before facing its first antitrust suit in 1913, the corporation had grown tremendously. The business struck a settlement with the Justice Department known as the Kingsbury Commitment, in which it divested Western Union while also providing other telephone companies access to AT&T's network. The agreement also stated that AT&T would need government approval before buying up competitors. One could argue that this acquisition helped AT&T maintain its monopoly status due to its sheer size and control of the telephone grid. In 1949, the government chased the corporation once more since it possessed the only provider of phones that could work with their network. Western Electric was the name of the company, and it rented phones to customers. Once again, a settlement was reached in which AT&T relinquished control of Western Electric. In 1915, the first transcontinental telephone call brought national long-distance service to San Francisco. This link made use of a system of lines with loading coils and the Audion vacuum tube repeater, which was initially tested between New York and Philadelphia in 1913. Transatlantic services began in 1927 with two-way radio, but the first transatlantic telephone cable, TAT-1, did not arrive until September 25, 1956. The monopoly. The corporation finally attained what most perceive as monopoly status as a result of a combination of regulatory efforts by the government and activities by AT&T. AT&T President Theodore Vail announced in 1907 that he was pursuing the objective of one policy, one system, universal service. AT&T began acquiring competitors, which drew the attention of antitrust authorities. To avoid antitrust protection, Vail consented to the Kingsbury Commitment of 1913 in an agreement with the government. One of the three provisions of the agreement prohibited AT&T from purchasing any more independent phone providers without the Interstate Commerce Commission's consent. According to G.W. Brock's The Telecommunications Industry, The Dynamics of Market Structure, the clause allowed Bell and the independents to exchange phone numbers in order to grant each other geographical monopolies. There was little reason to expect price competition as long as only one company serviced a given geographical area. AT&T concentrated its acquisitions in certain geographic areas, increasing its effective control of the telephone system market, while selling less attractive and previously acquired enterprises to independent purchasers. The Kingsbury Commitment also required AT&T to allow competitors to connect through its phone lines, reducing the incentive for these businesses to establish competitive long-distance lines. AT&T, RCA, and their patent supporters and partners eventually settled their conflicts by compromise in 1926. AT&T chose to concentrate on the telephone industry as a communications common carrier. selling its broadcasting subsidiary Broadcasting Company of America to RCA. The assets included WEAF, which had formerly broadcast from AT&T's headquarters in New York City. AT&T established a new division called Bell Telephone Laboratories, often known as Bell Labs, in 1925. This research and development facility was extremely successful, pioneering radio astronomy, the transistor, the photovoltaic cell, the Unix operating system, and the C programming language, among other things. In terms of the value of World War II military contracts, AT&T ranked 13th among U.S. firms. The Justice Department initiated an antitrust complaint in 1949 to force Western Electric's divestment, which was settled 7 years later with AT&T's commitment to limit its products and services to common carrier telecommunications and license its patents to all interested parties. This had the unintended consequence of prohibiting AT&T from selling computers, despite its vital involvement in electronics research and development. Nonetheless, technological advancements continued. In 1962, for example, AT&T launched Telstar 1, the first experimental communications satellite. The Bell system and all other telephone companies were governed by public utility commissions in state and local authorities. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, regulated all interstate services. These commissions govern the prices that businesses might charge, as well as the precise services and equipment they could provide. Through leasing contracts for telephones and telephone equipment arranged by its subsidiary Western Electric, AT&T strengthened its influence over the telephone infrastructure. Western Electric made phones, like other telephones at the time in the United States, were owned not by individual users, but by local Bell system telephone companies, all of which were in turn owned by AT&T, which also owned Western Electric. Customers rented each phone from AT&T on a monthly basis, and they typically paid for their phone and connection many times over in cumulative leasing payments. This monopoly generated millions of dollars in additional revenue for AT&T, which had the unintended consequence of severely limiting phone options and aesthetics. AT&T vigorously enforced laws prohibiting the purchase and use of phones manufactured by other companies that had not been transferred to and re-entered from the local Bell monopoly. Many Western Electric phones, as a result, had the following disclaimer permanently etched into their housings: Bell system property not for sale. The Federal Communications Commission approved the Carter phone and other devices to be directly linked to the AT&T network in 1968, as long as they did not cause system damage. This judgment allowed the sale of equipment that could connect to the phone system, opening the market to a variety of products such as answering machines, fax machines, cordless phones, computer modems, and the early dial-up internet. The lawsuits. AT&T has already successfully defended itself in multiple antitrust disputes. The company negotiated deals with the U.S. government in 1913 and 1956, allowing it to avoid dissolution for the majority of the century. However, as part of the 1956 deal, AT&T was required to keep out of other businesses. This restricted the company's ability to employ bundling to expand its monopoly into other industries. The last case commenced in 1974 and was resolved in favor of AT&T in 1982. In 1984, the Baby Bells were spun off from Ma Bell, and they received AT&T's local phone service business. The parent business kept its long-distance service while expanding into computers and other areas. Benefits of the breakup. The split of AT&T resulted in numerous significant benefits for consumers. AT&T did not enable users of their service to connect phones produced by other companies for many decades. They stated that these phones could harm network quality. AT&T also refused to sell its own phones to consumers, so everyone had to rent phones from the company. After the separation, the Baby Bells owned the direct ties to consumers and lifted the restrictions. It didn't take long for a vibrant market for selling phones to customers to emerge. Phone prices fell, phone quality improved, and phone rentals became obsolete. Southwestern Bell Corporation, one of the new firms founded as a result of AT&T separation. This corporation expanded steadily throughout the years until it purchased AT&T in 2005. Following the acquisition, SBC adopted AT&T's name and identity, and this is the corporation that we know today as AT&T. On January 1, 1984, American Telephone and Telegraph Company officially transferred complete ownership of Southwestern Bell Telephone Company to Southwestern Bell Corporation. In 1987, SBC bought Metromedia Inc.'s cellular and paging business. That in turn boosted the company to the third-largest cellular communications company in the United States, behind McCaw Cellular and Pacific Telesis. In January 1990, Edward Whittaker took over as president of Southwestern Bell. Headquarters were moved from St. Louis to San Antonio, Texas in February 1993. It acquired two cable companies in Maryland and Virginia from Hauser Communications for $650 million, becoming the first regional Bell telephone company to acquire a cable company outside its service area. In 1994, it called off a $1.6 billion acquisition attempt for 40% of Cox Cable because of FCC rules on cable companies. SBC would later start selling its current cable company interests. Another big advantage of AT&T's demise was competition in long-distance phone service. The Baby Bells gave customers the option of selecting from a variety of long-distance carriers. In this market, AT&T was opposed by companies such as MCI and Sprint. Long-distance prices decreased as competition and technology improved. By 2019, many Americans had stopped paying per-minute long-distance charges for domestic calls. However, per-minute costs for contacting international countries and smartphone plans remained widespread. Criticism of the breakup. The most serious criticism leveled about the split is that it may have delayed access to high-speed internet for many consumers. The requirement to use the local phone lines of the Baby Bells kept internet speeds low in the early days. AT&T was an early adopter of internet technology and was well regarded as an internet service provider in the 1990s. Many consumers would have had access to high-speed internet connection sooner if AT&T had retained ownership of local phone lines. Many of the Baby Bells waited too long, handing over a large portion of the data service industry to cable carriers and wireless services. Another complaint leveled at the split is that it was just unneeded. The main argument here is that AT&T would have faced competition from cable companies and wireless providers in the long run. The fact that many of the Baby Bells were eventually reintegrated into a single business lends credence to the contention that the rupture was unwarranted. The aftermath of the breakup. AT&T Technologies was formed from the merger of Western Electric and AT&T Network Systems, and it was divided into many units focused on specific consumer groups, such as AT&T Consumer Products and AT&T Network Systems. In 1991, it and Bell Labs will be fully amalgamated and subsumed into the American Telephone and Telegraph Company. AT&T ended telegraph services in 1991. Following the failure of its own attempt to enter the computer market, AT&T acquired NCR Corporation, National Cash Register, in 1991, hoping to capitalize on the burgeoning personal computer and Unix network server markets, but was unable to extract long-term financial or technological gains from the merger. NCR was divested again after the Telecommunications Act of 1996 deregulated the U.S. telecom market. Simultaneously, the majority of AT&T Technologies and the well-known Bell Labs were spun out as Lucent Technologies. Since the 1990s, the industry as a whole has undergone numerous reorganizations, both as a result of deregulation and technology improvements that have reduced demand and pricing power in telecommunications. AT&T paid $11.5 billion for McCaw Cellular, the largest cellular carrier, in 1994, and launched its cellular segment with 2 million subscribers. AT&T purchased long-distance operator Alaska Communications System in 1995. The FCC required that the company be administered as an AT&T subsidiary rather than being absorbed into AT&T Communications, giving the company the moniker AT&T Alascom. AT&T was a telecommunications behemoth in 2021, headed by its mobile and fixed telephone services. It also made significant inroads into the media industry, acquiring DirecTV in 2015 and Time Warner in 2018.